This episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks is brought to you by Gigabyte motherboards and graphics cards. Gigabyte has promised us some next-level products to be unveiled at Computex 2019, so stay tuned to HotHardware.com for future coverage. In this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, we'll have icy lakes, amazing Odysseys, we'll be rising up 3K, we'll have otherworldly laptops, snappy dragons, and perky pixels next. Welcome back to yet another fine episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks. I'm Dave Altavilla, and as always, I am joined by a couple of geeks, a couple of good guy geeks. I've got Marco Chiappetta and the other guy from Maine. His name is Chris Ayat. How you guys doing? Chris Getting, how you doing?
Doing good. Good.
Start with you. Yes, more than
Still
good.
Paul Lilly.
You still
We'll
have
fix
the
that.
Paul Lilly.
We will fix that.
He still has the Paul Lilly lower third. Nice. I think John's
We'll get
just
there.
torturing. John is just torturing you. He's having fun with you, Chris.
Probably.
Hey, Marco, do you have a Paul Lilly lower third? Do you?
I doubt it. I'm checking out my server now to see if I have the template to make Chris's lower third while we're chatting here.
That's all right. I like torturing him too a little bit. But Chris, we love you, and that's Chris Getting. And I mean, like a Viking brother, we love you. But he doesn't have his own credits right now. We'll have to find him some credits. He's only been on the podcast for forever. But hey, we won't complain too much. How's it going down in Connecticut today, Marco? What's new and exciting for you? Anything?
So we are in the midst of a crazy torrential downpour thunderstorm right now. Hopefully everything stays stable for me. And once again, I'm on daddy duty, so there's a possibility of interruptions tonight. A puppy sleeping next to me, 2 little girls in the next room. But as of this moment, things are good. Can't complain.
Puppy, daddy, children, life is good. Yeah, sounds like you're a blessed man. Excellent.
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. Chris, are you blessed? Are you blessed today? Are you feeling fortunate?
Yeah, it's been a good day. I actually got to participate in some special new pilot program training by some guys from LSU and Athena, who came and did some campus active shooter integrated training with us.
Wow.
So did some classroom stuff yesterday where we learned kind of some do's and don'ts type stuff. And today we actually went through live scenarios on campus in different buildings, different places, to see it all in action and actually experience. I mean, obviously not the full bloody detail thing like it would be in real life. And I really, really hope it never happens again. But in the event that it does, this training is actually going to be further developed and brought to campuses across the country, possibly. So it has a very important balance, very important role in hopefully saving lives in the future by getting more than just the first responders involved. They have different department figures from around the campus so that they can learn as an immediate responder how to react in these situations, how they can help out even before the police, fire, EMS can arrive.
Wow.
So, very cool day.
Holy mackerel. Yeah, heavy duty stuff. And you're right, it's kind of sad we have to have that kind of training, but by the same token, better to be trained. So Chris is you work in the IT department of a campus police department, correct?
Yes.
College
I am the campus police system administrator, separate from the regular campus IT.
In which fine institution again? One more time.
University of Maine.
U of Maine.
And Orono.
U of Maine. And Orono. Ah, yes, that's right. We discussed that before. UMaine Orono. Good stuff. Well, I bet you the guys at UMaine Orono, to switch to a happier subject, they probably drink beer. And Chris, I'm gonna tease our little beer sponsor today before we dig into the tech headlines. This year, well, they're not a sponsor, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm gonna endorse it because I bought myself this beer. This is Lord Hobo's Glorious, and it is a nice balanced, not a crazy high alcohol content IPA. Is it a double? I want to say it's not quite a double. It's a 6.8 by volume, but is a New England style IPA, citrus and hazy goodness, because we've earned it this week, Chris. Cheers to you. I know you don't have one today. Yeah, you're not participating today, huh?
Not today, no. I've got to be up early for unrelated training tomorrow. So busy week.
They don't want you drinking beer in the campus police department. The college kids do, but you can't.
I mean, probably not on duty, but
guaranteed the college kids do. Marco, do you drink beer on duty? Daddy duty?
I actually never drink beer. I've never taken a beer, had a sip, and said, "That's good." I just don't like beer.
Wow.
I know. I'll submit my man card now. It is what it is. I have my tasty water as usual.
There you go. Hey, that's it's good for your everything, for all the things in your body. Yes, that there water. Good. Well, hey, we're all hydrated and libated and beautiful. Let's move on to the tech headlines, shall we? That's what we're here for, and we'll stop the idle chit chat. By the way, if you're in the chat, please fire away with questions. We'd love to have them. And but let's dive into an absolute plethora assortment of technical wonder this week, and we just firing
like a big event is happening.
Yeah, go figure. Computex in Taiwan, where we are not, by the way, which is kind of nice. I say that only because for us here on the East Coast, Marco, Chris, and I, we're all nor'easters. It's like 24 hours to Asia, and I don't know about you, Marco, but man, and Chris, how do you handle with 13, 15-hour flight and then another 6-hour leg? And I cringe at the thought.
Maybe next year, Brittany and I will volunteer to go.
Hey, look at
that overlay.
Hey.
Oh, wow. Did you already fire that to him?
Yeah, I didn't save it high enough quality. I'll send you a better one in a couple of minutes.
I don't know. That looked pretty good, man. Looked pretty good.
I'm now a man with a name.
Excellent, Chris. You're a made man now. Yes, with an overlay. Beautiful. Lower third. All right. So yeah, Computex is going on in Taiwan. We're not there, but we're here to run down the headlines. And God knows, it's kind of nice being able to cover it, having the time to cover it. We go to CES, we go to all the shows, but we did not go to Computex this year. But let's talk about Intel, who has had some serious announcements this week. Intel's 10-nanometer Ice Lake architecture and Project Athena laptops to drive exciting new mobile PC experiences. Marco spent some quality time with the good folks at Intel. I am wearing my Intel Odyssey shirt, by the way. This is vintage stuff. The new graphics group, the Odyssey, that they're on, had these shirts going out at an event one time. Anyways, Marco, tell us about Ice Lake and Project Athena, and you were hanging out with some high-ranking individuals too, huh?
I was, and if you want to talk vintage shirts, this is an Intel vintage softball tee. I don't even know what year this was. It has to be like 10 years old. I don't throw clothes away. But yes, we finally have more details to share on Ice Lake as a platform and on Project Athena in terms of what the initial spec calls for and what Intel's goals are with this program. So first, let's talk about some of the new stuff that we now know about Ice Lake. So as a platform and as a processor, as an SoC, lots of new stuff coming with Ice Lake. If you're unfamiliar, this is Intel's 10 nanometer, the first wave of 10 nanometer processors that are due to ship very soon. The processors themselves the processor cores are based on the Sunny Cove microarchitecture. We told you about Sunny Cove back in December during Architecture Day, but now we have more product details on the first wave of Ice Lakes that are going to hit. So let me just get some basic stuff out of the way and you'll understand why, well, if you're a nerd like us, you'll understand why this is kind of a big deal. So Ice Lake is the next foundational architecture for Intel. Now, what that means is Haswell was the foundation for a few generations and then eventually went up and down the stack. Skylake came next. and that went up and down the stack, all the way from the high end down to low power processors. And now Ice Lake is the next foundational architecture. But what Intel has done here is not only make the CPU itself, basically, wider and faster and more efficient, but it's added some new instructions. And in aggregate, it's a much faster, more efficient platform that will, usher in a totally new wave of mobile devices that are faster and offer, really good battery life. So Ice Lake versus Sky Lake. I'm going to run down some quick basic specs that'll help you understand why it's faster and more efficient. So first, L1 data cache has been doubled. Not doubled. It's like 50% more, up to 48K. L2 cache has been doubled. The L2 oh my God, I am mumbling like a slob today.
That's okay.
The L2 TLB is like 30% bigger, 248 slots there. The UOP cache is 2.25 versus 1.5K in Skylake. The out of order window, much bigger, 352 versus 224. In-flight loads, 128 on Ice Lake versus 72 on Skylake. And in-flight stores, 72 on Ice Lake and 56 on Skylake. Now, you also have new DL boost instructions for accelerating AI and machine learning workloads. And integrated into the platform, you have Wi-Fi 6 Gig Plus, so greater than gigabit speed Wi-Fi 6. You have integrated Thunderbolt 3. It's no longer a separate ASIC to get Thunderbolt 3 on a mobile device. You have a completely revamped memory controller that can be configured with LPDDR4X or regular DDR4 in different configurations. Some will offer more bandwidth than another. So LPDDR4X running at 3733 is upwards of 50 to 60 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. That's a huge upgrade, which is important for graphics. And Ice Lake also has Gen 11 graphics. So the latest generation of Intel's EUs, the execution units for the graphics engine, up to 64 EUs at up to 1.1 gigahertz. And in conjunction with that additional memory bandwidth, you get a integrated GPU that's capable of 1080p gaming with some, mainstream and esports titles. So all told, basically an upgrade across the board. You have the power savings from 10 nanometer plus architectural updates that make the architecture more efficient. You have all of these new features that accelerate IPC and overall performance. I should mention that according to Intel, the average IPC upgrade, so instructions per clock, is 18% better than Skylake. But with machine learning workloads, it can be up to 40% faster, which is a huge upgrade. All told, we don't have hardware yet, but all told, Ice Lake should make for an awesome foundation for new notebooks.
Sweet. Yeah, no, it's definitely next level stuff, as they say, for Intel. And truly, as you noted, the foundation for the next generation of core series processors, whether it be notebook or desktop down the road, but starting out with the mobile platforms. Cool stuff. 18% general 18% gain in IPC is pretty significant. And what's interesting about that is, and we're going to get to Ryzen 3000, AMD's Ryzen 3000 Zen 2 processor launch later in the cast. But what's interesting there is AMD came out and said, hey, Ryzen 3000 Zen 2, we are now IPC performance parity with Intel, instructions per clock, parity with Intel, current generation. Now, I assume that was not parity with Ice Lake. So this will be interesting to see. Certainly, it's notebooks initially, and we know that Intel has already said shipping sometime in June. We will have product in market from various OEMs sometime this summer. I think we're going to start seeing some shipments in June. I've already seen some laptops from some of the majors like Dell and a few others in the flesh running 10th gen Intel Core series processors under the hood, and they looked like finished product, like ready to roll. So great stuff. I also noticed, so we've got an IPC here. We've got 4 cores, 8 threads on the average laptop or notebook processor. I also noticed integrated Thunderbolt 3, huh? So now you're going to have better flexibility with Thunderbolt ports because of that, or what does that bring to the table?
So yeah, I should probably mention the actual processors for a second. I skipped it before. So there will be Core i3, Core i5, and Core i7 Ice Lake based processors up to quad cores, 8 threads, and ranging from 9 watts to 28 watts. So basically, you know, the U and Y series Intel mobile processors are all going to be updated with Ice Lake. But to answer your question about Thunderbolt 3, this is actually some really cool stuff. So, you know, on current platforms, there's a separate ASIC for enabling Thunderbolt 3. And the ASICs, you know, it adds some cost and it adds some complexity when laying it down on a motherboard, which is why you see lots of notebooks with Thunderbolt 3 only have those ports on one side. Right. So with Ice Lake, the Thunderbolt 3 is integrated into the SoC. So all that you need, well, I don't want to trivialize the implementation, but it's easier. You no longer need the ASIC, but you just need to use some basic retimers to connect the Thunderbolt 3 out to the USB Type-C ports that are out. And now with the way it can be routed with integrated, you'll probably see designs with Thunderbolt on both sides. So in aggregate, still up to 4 ports, right? You're not going to get more ports out of Ice Lake. But to actually route it on the boards, it's easier, it's lower power, because it's more tightly coupled to the CPU, performance is better. Intel has actually said that, you know, it hasn't been qualified, so they're not making any specific claims, but it will likely be USB 4 compliant once all the testing is done. So yeah, you know, Thunderbolt will eventually just be ubiquitous in notebooks now with Ice Lake.
Makes sense. And you know, that's actually a pretty compelling feature. And you would think, oh, it's, you know, it's just an IO option. It's sort of trivial, but there were a lot of notebooks manufactured, especially in the early days of Thunderbolt, where you were getting ports there, but you weren't getting full bandwidth. You know, what is it, 40 gigabits per second or something like that? You weren't getting full bandwidth. You know, and there was, you know, additional cost added. So now that it's integrated onto the chip, you're talking about reducing the cost, the bill of materials, where it's monolithic in CPU silicon now. So it's kind of a big deal. I was a little bit surprised to see that we didn't see some next generation serial IO upgrades, PCI Express 4 for Ice Lake. But then again, you know, I guess in notebook form factor, perhaps you don't need that level of internal bandwidth as much as you do with, let's say, a desktop product. So we'll have to see what comes down the road. And Marco, I'm sure you probably have been tipped on a little bit of that kind of stuff, future stuff under embargo or something like that. But yeah, any thoughts on the current lack of PCI Express 4 or?
I mean, it won't matter in notebooks in terms of graphics. Where it would, though, is, you know, all these new PCIe 4 SSDs that have been announced the last couple of days, you know, with up to 5 gigabytes per second transfers. And although no one has specifically said it, because of the faster transfer rate on PCIe 4, and likely because the new controllers have faster internal pathways, latency will also probably be better, unless there's something funky with the designs. So could be a huge upgrade for storage when the time comes. Yeah. We'll see. But, you know, what Intel did talk about, they revealed some details on so Project Athena was, you know, announced back at CES. And a few weeks back, they announced the Project Athena Labs, where Intel will help their partners, you know, qualify all of the components and systems that may fall under the Project Athena umbrella. But now we also know what the initial spec for the first year. Now, the Project Athena spec is going to change yearly. It's going to have an annual spec update. And so it's tough to get excited initially about these things, but I want you guys to go back to the Ultrabook, you know, initiative. When Intel announced Ultrabooks, we had a lot of crappy notebooks out there. We had the whole netbook thing going on that almost, brought down the mobile PC industry. It was so bad. And we had lots of crappy notebooks. And then Intel announced this Ultrabook initiative. Intel Capital actually announced it, and they were investing in partners that were innovating in the space and, set a spec and kind of push the industry forward. And now today we have some awesome, beautiful premium notebooks. Now, Intel hopes Project Athena has a similar impact years down the line. This is years down the line. This is a multi-year effort. But for now, what the goals are with the initial spec for Project Athena, I'm just going to read them off. I'm going to read the pillars off Intel's slide just so I don't screw anything up. So ready to go before you are. So machines have to, wake from sleep and have connected standby. So you're not waiting for the network to connect. You can get on as soon as you open the lid. Everything's just faster and responsive. And then performance and responsiveness, at least a Core i5 or Core i7 with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gig NVMe storage. Something called adaptive intelligence. So you need to have far-field mics for voice control, support for Windows ML, the machine learning language, and other APIs. A worry-free day of battery life. So what does that mean? So that means 16 plus hours of local video playback. That's massive. Or 9+ hours of real web browsing. And the machines need to charge for 4 hours of battery life in less than 30 minutes. So fast charging, always fast, reliably connected. That's just IO stuff. So Thunderbolt 3, that's going to be part of the platform. Wi-Fi 6 gig plus, that's also integrated into the PCH. It's part of the Ice Lake platform as well. A gigabyte LTE option, and then form factor and interaction updates. So has to be premium touchpads, thin bezels on 3 sides of the display, backlit keyboards, stylus support, touch support. So basically setting the stage for premium machines with awesome battery life. And now all of this stuff has to be tested and qualified and verified before something will, be, authorized as Project Athena. So everyone's got their work cut out for them, but machines will arrive this holiday season that are Project Athena compliant. So we're going to have some nice machines coming this holiday.
Cool. Yeah, no, good stuff. I think it makes sense when you've got, a new complement, a new wealth of technology to productize around that literally changes the game, so to speak, that enables use cases and applications that weren't historically enabled because of new capability, because of new performance. Chris, what are your thoughts on Ice Lake? And then we'll ping you next on the graphics side of Ice Lake too, because there's some new stuff there. But what are your thoughts on the platform side?
Well, it's nice to see 10 nanometer finally developed for Intel, so that's very promising. I do think it's interesting that they're starting with the push on the mobile side so hard, especially because there have been so many concerns about the yield and stuff of 10 nanometer. There tend to be smaller chips, a little easier to produce. Sorry about the background noise if you can hear it. Maybe not easier to produce, but
yeah.
Sorry, lost my words there. Anyways, on the graphics side, anyways, if you want me to go there yet,
go for it.
So we've seen some numbers put out now comparing the Ice Lake U integrated graphics to Ryzen 7 3700U integrated graphics, as well as the 8th gen Core i7 8565U's integrated graphics. So what we're seeing relative to the 8th gen Core i7 is a pretty massive uplift, pretty much across all titles tested, as much as double the performance, which is awesome. We love seeing that, just making casual gaming that much more accessible to more users. So that's very positive, and that's using their 15-watt Ice Lake U mystery chip, I guess, at this point. Do we know which chip that is yet? I don't.
Well, I think it's safe to assume that this is basically the product that Marco covered in the original launch, which is a quad core processor, quad core 8-thread notebook chip, and so Gen 11 graphics in general is the new IGP in Ice Lake. I think we can assume it's, and we've got some numbers here from 15 watt as well as 25 watt SKUs. I think the average Ultrabook or Project Athena Ultrabook that Marco talked about is probably a 15 watt SKU. So those performance numbers,
yeah. So that was the 15 watt compared to the 8565U Core i7. Then down on the 25 watt side, they compare it to the Ryzen 7 3700U, which is also a 25 watt chip. And there we're seeing that it's edging out the Ryzen chip with its Vega integrated GPU on there. So, I mean, we already knew that the Vega integrated GPU was a powerhouse as far as integrated graphics go. So to see Intel finally seemingly stepping up their integrated graphics with these Gen 11 Ice Lake SKUs is very promising. Now, it doesn't take the Vega down across all titles. Dirt Rally and in 3D Mark Night Raid, it does fall slightly behind, but then it's faster in Skydiver, it's faster in Fire Strike, and it's faster across all the other game titles tested. So it is a very promising look to Intel's integrated graphics. Always happy to see that, because if you don't need a discrete GPU in your Ultrabook, that cuts down on heat. It's going to save you battery life generally, because they tend to be more efficient than a discrete chip. Not always, but depends on the setup. And so I don't see what's not to like about that.
Yeah, no, good stuff for sure. And it's interesting, John. I don't know. I just dropped a couple of links in the in our chat, our broadcast chat here. You noted two metrics actually. There's a 15 watt performance metric that Gen 9 versus Gen 11 could show, and it's impressive. Yeah, you actually see in some game titles 1.8 to 2x performance. But what I really liked, John, I don't know if you can get that. Take a look in the chat. I don't know if you can get that chart up on the screen. But what I really liked was the fact that Intel is highlighting AAA titles, big, high volume, battle royale type stuff that is popular out there these days. You've got Fortnite, you've got Overwatch, Rocket League's out there. These are all very popular titles. CS:GO is out there. These are not high-end graphics titles, but they're popular titles that are played by a lot of gamers. And yeah, the performance numbers versus previous gen versus 8th gen Core i7 with Gen 9 HD 620 graphics, if you will. It's actually significantly faster. And then when you look at the 25 watt SKU, John says neither work. Oh well. John, if you scroll down the main article page and just hit one of those images, bar chart images, you'd be able to see it. But anyways, the 25 watt SKU versus AMD, it also edges it out by as much as, there you go. There's the 25 watt SKU there by as much as 10 or 12%. Loses in 3D Mark, a couple of the Dirt Rally, which is, sort of nebulous stuff. But again, Fortnite, Overwatch, Rainbow Six, Rocket League, big AAA titles, it is beating AMD integrated graphics in the 25 watt. Now, again, Ultrabooks generally focus on 15 watt solutions. This is 25 watt. It's a higher end machine. It's a more full featured laptop, 5 pound plus kind of machine. And yeah, what we used to say was, AMD with Ryzen, everybody was excited for AMD with Ryzen coming to laptops. And because of their integrated graphics prowess, that Vega 10 IGP that's included in Ryzen 7 3700 series processors, for example, that's a strong IGP. Now Intel is actually one-upping them, and we'll have to see what next generation Zen 2 with Navi integrated graphics looks like. But right now, in terms of what's on the market and what's going to ship in Ice Lake soon, looks like Intel's got them beat. And that's a lot of, what's that?
Well, this is all going to be dependent on the particular notebook form factor, their thermal solution. There's a lot of other variables that are going to go into this. So it is going to need independent testing and on a per model basis. But yeah, again, that we can even see Intel performing at this level is promising. I also wish that they would show the individual game frame rates. They show the resolution and the graphics preset, whether it's low or medium, what have you. So they have the relative frame rates to each other, and I guess you could extrapolate that if you knew the other chips targeted that at those settings. But it's always nice to see the actual frame rate so you can know if you're hitting a playable 60 FPS or if it's still in the 20 FPS, not really doing too much for your range.
Yeah, you make a good point here, and this is the caveat that we need to underscore for anything that you see that is generated from the manufacturer. It is not independent third-party testing. These are numbers that Intel is quoting, and so you take those for face value and perhaps with a grain of salt for flavor, because it needs to be third-party validated and tested, and that's what we do best by gum at HotHardware. So, we're on that. But good stuff. Thanks, Chris, for that breakout on Gen 11 graphics from Intel. We have a question in the chat from Craig Dieter who says, and this one's probably for Marco, am I understanding correctly that Intel has beefed up the front end versus Skylake based on the architecture increases you talked about? It sounds like he's saying, has Intel beefed up Ice Lake's front end versus Skylake? I think that's the question. Marco, what do you think there?
Yes. So Intel actually said in my briefing that every single piece of IP in the chip has been touched and upgraded, including, a better prefetcher and all of that larger cache. It can handle, more instructions in flight. Basically, everything about Ice Lake is upgraded over Skylake. And as I mentioned, that 18% IPC update, that's a big deal. Now, it seems like that's a lot generation over generation, but remember, kind of missed one in between there and 10 nanometers late. So Intel's had a long time here, but still with that, with the new instructions in conjunction with just architectural updates, should be a major improvement across the board. We're really looking forward to testing it out.
Good stuff. Ice Lake from Intel with Gen 11 graphics. I'm interested in seeing Gen 11 graphics, and certainly the other thing that's interesting about Intel is the attitude that they've taken towards really pulling in community involvement to help improve and enhance their product solutions on the software side as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit next. But before we move on, Chris, anything else to add on the graphics side, or is that pretty much say it all? Did we touch upon the highlights for you?
Yeah, I think we've covered it. The only other thing was Intel's VRS feature test results for 3D Mark. So VRS is the variable rate shading, which can kind of let the GPU cheat a little bit to improve performance by obviously varying the rate of shading on there. So we see that with VRS disabled, it again with the 25 watt SKUs, it is coming just behind the Ryzen 7. It's about 0.94x times the performance, so just a little under. But when they enable the VRS, then it takes a 1.32x lead.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's interesting to note, and it's a good segue actually for something I'll talk about as well. VRS stands for variable rate shading, and that is a next generation shading technique that Intel has adopted support for in Gen 11 graphics. It's something that NVIDIA also supports in its Turing family of GPU architectures. So it's next generation rendering technology that allows the game developer to utilize shaders more efficiently in a scene. So, for example, when you're I don't know, let's use a car simulator game engine, for example. When you're in the car game engine, and you're looking on the horizon, you need less detail, you need less shader computation on the horizon area of the scene than you do close to the car, where the car is being rendered in the frame and in detail that's closer to your eyes, and certainly things that are closer to your periphery as well as you're driving in the vehicle. Down the road again, and off in the periphery, further out in the area around you, you can shade less because you just don't need that detail. It's moving as well, as objects are moving past. They need less detail because they're blurred by motion blur. So you can use variable rate shading, or VRS, to minimize the workload, unnecessary workload, and thus improve frame rate as well. So yeah, that's what happens there with in that test, the 3D Mark VRS feature test, and Intel does scale nicely there. I don't believe currently, at least with Vega, matter of fact, I'm certain they don't support variable rate shading. We don't know, or what do we know about Navi? I don't think we know much whether or not that supports variable rate shading. You would think it would, but it's not here yet, so we don't know. Marco, do you have any G2 on that, or is that like scuttlebutt at this point? I don't think we've been briefed. That's an interesting part.
We have to wait to talk about Navi stuff.
yeah. Let's just leave it at that. So yeah, so it's cool, but let's move on to the next segment that I'll talk about. So there's variable rate shading, and I guess that's sort of the bottom line is Intel's even their IGP and Ice Lake, which is here and now, shows significant advancement in graphics technology versus the Intel Gen 9 of old. And so and that sort of tees us up to the next segment. Intel Odyssey futuristic 2035 GPU collection is totally wild. Driver advancements and game updates released. John, I don't know if you can cut to that so the folks can see what wild looks like. There it is. That's actually a picture of a futuristic Intel graphics card as imagined by Cristiano. Oh, I'm trying to think of this guy's last name. I have to find his last name. Anyways, Cristiano Sequeira is his name, if I'm saying that correctly, is a designer that Intel's been working with. And John, I don't know if you can scroll down the page and we'll take a look at some of these other designs. But Intel basically challenged this guy to, they brought him in initially on the first round of design renders, concept renders, if you will, for the Intel Odyssey, the trip that they're taking everybody on, the community on, the enthusiast community on, to as they define their graphics, discrete graphics products and features and solutions down the road. And they brought this designer in, and initially he came out with these pretty standard looking, metallic, standard form factor cards. Looked kind of edgy, looked kind of cool, but nothing like this. This time around, as you can see, this is some next level stuff. And they said to Cristiano, they said, hey, just go design something. Don't think about materials. Don't think about physics. Don't think about technology that's available today. Design something that is, in your opinion, the GPU of 2035. So 15 years down the road, what are we looking at? 15 years plus down the road, what is a GPU going to look like? What are the qualities? What are the materials, the textures, the effects that will be on it? And it was an interesting exercise. Some might think, oh, it's just marketing, it's fluff and all that stuff. But I differ with that, because it's actually a practice that technology companies and other companies in different fields employ fairly effectively to inspire design, to inspire creativity, and to inspire new things to bring forth in a product that, sure, it's futuristic, it's science fiction, but guess what? Science fiction is tomorrow's reality, and especially when it comes to tech. So that was the premise they gave this guy, and they said, go design these things. And John, keep throwing them up on screen when you get a chance. But they're really cool, and it really just sort of puts a vision stake in the sand. That's an interesting one. It's a steampunk motif, if you will. I think that's probably the least futuristic, but also kind of cool. There's some other ones in there that are interesting as well. This one's my favorite. It's called Gemini. There you go, John. If you could scroll up to the front of that card. This is one that, and you know, the card at the very top of the piece looks more like a traditional graphics card, but this card right here, Gemini, has a concept on it that is plausible and also very futuristic. This is what you're looking at. There are what Cristiano rendered as ionic cooling chambers. So ionic propulsion has been developed. Dyson has some air circulators. You can't even call them fans because they're not blades, but they circulate air through the room with ionic conduction, if I'm saying that correct. And then there's also been some MIT students and researchers actually developed ionic propulsion for the first plane. It's a very light glider that flies. They actually had it fly indoors. And so it's a feasible product for air movement. And you would think, you know, this is kind of wild, kind of futuristic, but also maybe plausible. Do you want to have a quiet graphics card, a power efficient graphics card in the future that's maybe ionically cooled? I don't know. But it's something that, you know, Intel sort of challenged this designer, this talented designer with, said, you know, just think out of the box, go nuts. What can you show us? And it allows them to sort of project, you know, a direction that they're going in the future. Not necessarily, Intel said we're not committing to any of these, obviously, as design form factors or features or anything like that, but it just inspires things. And actually, I've talked with other companies like Dell, for example. When you look at their new line of Alienware laptops, we'll be talking about those in a little bit later in the cast as well. They actually had a very similar process, an internal process. They didn't go to an external guy like this designer or to the community for feedback. I think they brought their own designers in, but they in the Legend design signature for the new line of Alienware M15 and M17 laptops, and then the Alienware Area 51M big boy gaming laptop that I reviewed. They actually had, they took me to their design and innovation lab, and they actually had up on the wall all of these stencils and all these textures and materials and different like spacecraft designs and all this stuff that they just put up there and brainstormed with to sort of inspire the design process to do something different. And lo and behold, what they came up with was this very spacecraft looking rear cooling vent system that's actually quite efficient, a honeycomb grill on it that buffets air, you know, differently and more efficiently, and really kind of cool the way they came up with that. But a very similar process, you know, think about stuff that's way off in science fiction land, and see if there's something we can pull from here to help develop a next generation product. So I thought that was cool. Of Intel to sort of step out with this and to keep, you know, driving forward with the community and showing their, I guess, thought process and leadership that they're trying to invoke with this. Marco, I don't know what your thoughts are with that. You know, it seems kind of crazy, totally wild for sure, but I mean, you might not buy an ionically cool graphics card, but it's a cool concept to consider and see where it takes you, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, sometimes you need to have these wild designs to spark some creativity, and you know, maybe it doesn't come to fruition right away, but yeah, it sparks something that can happen in a generation or two, and you know, really spur some innovation. So, but I think it was really cool. The designs look cool at the very least. That's for sure.
Yeah. Chris, any thoughts there? You're a pretty grounded, down to earth guy in Maine, there, pal. This is the kind of thing that I think you might look a little sideways at. What do you think?
I mean, Looks absolutely do matter. Look at how long we've had heat spreaders on RAM that haven't actually served a functional purpose just because they look awesome and plain PCBs are boring. So the nicer ways you can dress it up is going to instill more consumer confidence. Because too, if you have the R&D to also throw it at the physical design of it as much as you have the performance of it, it's going to give a more premium kind of psychological reaction to it. And when you're coming out and creating this new market within your company for Intel dedicated GPUs, you really want to make a statement with that and make something that looks like, the customers are going to see it and say, yes, I want that in my computer because it looks freaking awesome.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The bling factor for the average enthusiast, computing enthusiast, gaming enthusiast, what have you, PC gaming enthusiast, the bling factor is important. And so there's that too. And I think Intel's on the right track there. I mean, if you're going to do this thing, they've turned their sights full gun on discrete graphics and graphics in general, with not only their executive hires, the high-end horsepower from Raja Koduri to Chris Hook to Jim Keller to, you can just go on and on and on. The people that they've brought in to make this thing real. Ari Rausch, by the way, spoke with him about this launch in a little call out of Computex. We had a conference call. Also, Lisa Pierce, I'm going to forget her official title, but she's general manager, I believe, of software engineering for the driver team. These people are very talented and pretty smart, and I think they're going about it right, where they're pulling the community to, get feedback, to bounce ideas off of, to give their vision, to show their vision early, so that the community can give feedback and help guide, as well as their own internal talented, smart folks to bring it together as well. And so I think it makes sense. They also released today a driver that you can download from the Microsoft Store. The new Intel Graphics Command Center has been launched. And in that driver package, Marco stepped through this a little bit in the Ice Lake launch piece. In that driver package, I don't think we have a link to it, but maybe I'll drop it into the chat. There's a bunch of new features. So you've got things like fan and cooling and power profile optimizations. You've got custom skins to customize the look and feel of the driver, and then you've also have one click optimizations built in as well. So the driver now intelligently scans your computer to look for the game titles you have on your machine, and then with one click will optimize for the GPU that's in your machine. And I think I'm not sure how many generations back it's compatible with, but Gen 9 at least, and probably more. And certainly for Gen 11 graphics when Ice Lake comes out. It will detect the IGP. In this case, the IGP these days, and in the future, it will detect the discrete GPU. And it will optimize the in-game settings automatically for you to provide the most optimal experience, both visually and frame rate wise. So pretty good stuff. And again, this was all stuff that was feedback. The other thing it has built in is simple, thoughtful stuff that, again, was feedback from the community that people had asked for, that Intel did actually a Reddit AMA, ask them anything or ask me anything or ask you anything. AYA is what they did. Yeah, that's it. Anyways, they asked the community a bunch of questions and got some feedback. And one of the things they came up with was, hey, we've got all these settings. Why not have a little glossary, hint on what the setting is and what it does and what it means? So VSync, what does it do, and describe it in detail. And so it's definitely a good day for Intel. They're doing the right things, and this new driver drop is sort of evidence of that as well. So let's move on finally from the folks at Intel, and let's get wrapping up a little bit more in this cast, because we've really stayed on the Intel bandwagon for a while. Let's move on to AMD, and then we'll circle back to a couple other things as well. But let's talk about AMD unveils Ryzen 3000 CPUs, 12 core at $499, IPC parity with Intel, at least the current generation, Navi ahead of RTX 2070. That's the graphics chip, next generation GPU from AMD. Marco, you've been talking with the good folks at AMD as well. What do you know?
So Dr. Lisa Su really killed it at Computex. So she did her AMD's very first opening keynote at the International Press Conference at Computex. And she basically revealed a bunch of new information from top to bottom product lineup. So we have some new details on EPYC. She showed, back at CES, or maybe earlier in the year, might not have been CES, they showed a single second gen EPYC, the Rome processor, outperforming one of Intel's top end Xeons. This time around, they did a 2P setup. So 2 Rome processors, I believe, was 128 cores total. I don't remember the exact configuration versus 2 Intel Xeon 8280. So Intel's top Cascade Lake 28 core processors, not dual 56 core processors. So 2 28 core processors. And the Rome setup was twice as fast. So that was massive. Then there was also some news on Navi. So Navi is going to arrive in July. This is the next gen GPU architecture. The cores are totally redesigned. So most of AMD's few previous generation GPUs, the actual execution units are based on GCN, Graphics Core Next. These are being labeled RDNA, Radeon DNA. So new cores, completely redesigned for efficiency and performance. And what we know so far is the first cards to arrive are going to be in the Radeon RX 5700 series. So those early rumors were wrong about that 3080 number. And the chip that Dr. Su showed on stage, she did not reveal pricing, and it's tough to see just how big the die is, but it looks kind of small, was faster than than a GeForce RTX 2070. So that's interesting because the rumors were Navi is going to be a mainstream part. So there's a possibility AMD is going to severely undercut NVIDIA in terms of pricing, and we could have some really killer high performance GPUs at a mainstream price point. It's not going to take on the very high end from NVIDIA, but if you can get 2070 like performance for, let's say, $400, I think people would be psyched. And then some really exciting processor announcements. So the Ryzen 3000 series, so actual Zen 2 chips, she killed it with this stuff. I think everybody's excited about these processors. AMD announced, she showed 3 on stage. They announced 5, from a Ryzen 5 3600 on up to a Ryzen 9 3900X. The base price point, $199. The top 12 core, which is going to work in socket AM4. That's important to note. 12 cores, 24 threads, only 105 watts, 4.6 gigahertz boost frequency, 70 megs of cache. 70 megs of cache, only $499. So the demo on stage showed this chip outperforming an $1,100 Intel 12-core processor. And that 12-core processor is, an HEDT. It requires an X299 platform. This is AMD's mainstream platform, not the Threadripper replacement. And then you have the 3800X is an 8-core, 16-thread, 4.5 gigahertz boost. That's also a 105-watt processor. But the 3700X, 8 cores, 16 threads, boost at 4.4, 36 megs of cache. It's only 65 watts and $329. That's nuts. And then, another important note, 2 more important notes. All of these things are PCI Express 4 compliant, PCI Express 4 enabled, I should say. And so I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, so here's the thing to note. Ryzen 9 3900X, 12 cores, 24 threads. But those chiplets are 8 cores in each chiplet. So theoretically, we could have a 16-core processor, 16-core 32 in socket AM4. And now we have Ashen asking, do 12 cores matter in gaming? Yes and no. So one of AMD's product managers, Robert Halleck on LinkedIn, actually boldly said that these processors have the fastest single thread performance, not parity. He said fastest. So that's important for gaming. But all of that cache allows more data to be closer to the processor. So even though all the cores may not be utilized, all that cache would help. And as more games start using more threads, those extra cores will help. It also helps. Now, this is something that's lost on lots of people that everybody forgets. You don't need a single app to use all of those threads. Every process running in the background on a system is using a thread. So if you have stuff running in the background on your machine, having those extra cores can make the experience better and have less slowdowns, less hiccups, less stuttering, stuff like that. So really good stuff.
That, and that's what occurs to me with this platform. It's impressive as heck, not only in terms of its performance, but the system resources that are involved in the power envelope that they're in. I mean, you've got a 12-core, 24-thread processor with 70 megs of cache at 105 watts. And I mean, that's just freaking fantastic. Then you throw in PCI Express 4, okay, 40 lanes of PCI Express 4 now. So at $499, the price point's great. So you've got cost and power efficiency, which in silicon is the freaking name of the game, baby. That's it. When you talk about silicon, it's cost and power, performance per watt and cost. And so, that's what we're talking. They're talking about, IPC parity, but in some cases, certainly with a 12-core processor with a big fat cache like that, there's efficiencies of scale that come into play, and that's what Robert Halleck was talking about, where he's, it's going to have the fastest IPC, the fastest multi-core performance on the market. Kind of believe it based on the specs. Want to see it for myself. I don't think he'd make that claim publicly and not be able to back it up. He's a pretty straight-laced guy. He's a good guy. So, yeah, it's just impressive as heck, right? Like, and the price point's even more exciting. So,
yes.
Good
Now,
stuff.
if I were to play devil's advocate, so 15% IPC uplift, awesome. Double the cache, double the floating point. So clearly going to be a compute powerhouse. Definitely dollar for dollar. Having that separate I/O die is going to, I'm going to bet the farm we're going to see some anomalous performance in some applications. Because, with the current Ryzen, mainstream Ryzen processors, memory's attached directly to the CPUs, to the CPU die. Now you have these, core dies attached via Infinity Fabric to an I/O die, which has the memory controller. So now there's a hop in there. It's probably going to add latency. Maybe not. Maybe there's some new secret mojo in there that they haven't discussed yet. I'll know in a few weeks. I might be completely wrong, but there's a possibility that now, like we saw originally, if something had to jump from one core to another in Threadripper, that would happen on this 12-core processor. Something would have to go from chiplet to I/O die to chiplet. There's possibility for some weird stuff, but we'll see. I'm still psyched about it. Really looking forward to it. I know we're running long, so I should shut my mouth. But yeah, bottom line, AMD killed that Computex keynote. Everybody's talking about AMD right now. The stock even shot up.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense when you talk about the stock. You're talking about in CPUs on the desktop and in the data center. You're talking about market share that bites into Intel. Chris, let's have you chime in real quick on your thoughts. And I'm impressed as heck to hear also as well that Navi is going to compete with a RTX 2070, actually slightly faster is what the claim was. We'll see it, believe it when we see it, but impressive that they've hit that watermark, which is good. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think it's time to retire my Skylake.
Woo! Yeah. So yeah, no, it's good stuff for sure. AMD seems to be firing on all cylinders right now. I want to see Navi. I want to see how they execute with that. Let's move on real quickly. And John, I don't know how much extra time you got for us, but I do want to move on to Qualcomm. Qualcomm shows Snapdragon 8cx smacking an Intel Core i5 around in the PC mark. And that's a benchmark that we're very familiar with here at HotHardware.com. They actually have a new build of it that is ARM native. Chris, what do you know about this Snapdragon 8cx, which is perhaps the new engine of thin and light laptops? Who knows?
Yeah, so Qualcomm is making this comparison to the Core i5 8250U, which is a very capable chip we saw last year. And I think it is something that when I was with ARM in Austin, when they were talking about their designs, they were kind of hinting at this as a target for performance. So I'm definitely not surprised to see Qualcomm now come out and say that they've achieved it, because ARM was very clear that they all but named the Core i5 as their target, and they wanted to beat it on performance parity with less than half or maybe a quarter of the actual area of the chip. So I'm not surprised by this by any means, but it is very nice to see the confirmation now, and especially with the optimizations with native processing on Windows.
Right.
So I think that adds a lot of confidence in looking at Qualcomm powered notebooks, always on notebooks moving forward. I know Intel's also really wanting to target that always on long battery life kind of market. So it's going to create a very interesting competition there, that if you had told us, 3 years ago that Intel was going to be competing with Qualcomm on mobile computers on a serious level, we may have thought you were crazy, but here we are. So I think it's a very, very exciting to say. So the specific tests they were looking at in PC Mark 10, the overall score was edging out the 8250U by 100 points. Not every subset was on parity. The Excel subscore was 500 points or so below the Intel chip. PowerPoint was a little ahead. Word was a lot a bit ahead, about almost a 500-600 point pickup over the Intel. And then the Edge browser also did very well on the Qualcomm chip. Then moving down into gaming with the Night Raid benchmark, which is the lighter version of the DirectX 12 benchmark that has been recently released. We're seeing a very big performance uplift over what the 8250U and its UHD 620 graphics can offer. There is a little caveat to compare on these, because the Qualcomm system was actually running a newer update of Windows 10 with the May 2019 update, while the Intel-based one was on the Windows 10 October 2018 update. We shouldn't see too much difference performance-wise with that, but there could be some optimization differences here and there. We would expect Qualcomm to be more sensitive to that because Intel's already pretty well figured out. But that is something to consider when you're looking at these numbers. It would be nice if they were running the same version. But overall, from a performance standpoint, from a non-x86 chip with Windows, it's great. And then, of course, moving down to the battery life, the Qualcomm chip is just crushing it with, nearly double the battery life in all tests. So it's a lot more power efficient. You're getting a lot more time away from the charger.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an impressive platform. It's early. I'm actually testing a whitebook prototype right now for Qualcomm. I can't say too much about it. I can tell you when it's in standard applications, Windows, Office applications, other things that are certainly native, it just feels like a regular laptop. This thing's got 8 gigs of RAM. It's got I think a 512 gig NVMe SSD. It does have NVMe on board, by the way, supports NVMe and up to 8-channel memory, I believe. So yeah, it feels very much like a standard, Intel Core series laptop performance-wise, but it has that absolute power-sipping Qualcomm Snapdragon chip on there, and so battery life is just like forget about it, like literally forget about it. So impressive stuff. It's in the making. The folks at Qualcomm will have to see how that transpires in the weeks ahead. They're still baking that chip a little bit, or at least the platform. But I think you're going to start seeing the Snapdragon 8cx series of product populating some new laptop SKUs this year in the not so distant future. So keep a lookout for that. Check HotHardware.com for our future coverage. I do want to mention one quick honorable mention that you should check out: my Pixel 3a XL review. Google Pixel 3a XL. Here's the phone, and for $479 actually for the XL variant. Screen's blowing out the screen. Sorry. This is one of the best values in Android smartphones in the market currently. Performance-wise, it's got a Snapdragon 670 on board, so not top end. I won't get too deep into it here because we got to wrap, but performance-wise, feels great. I mean, it's pretty much, your average smartphone experience. If you're a heavy-duty gamer, you might be missing that Snapdragon 855 or 845 engine for things like gaming, but the average mainstream user, I don't think you're going to miss it. And it still has that absolutely fantastic Pixel 3 camera on board. One of the best values in Android smartphones in the market, the Google Pixel 3a and Pixel 3a XL. Also excellent battery life. Came in second, I think, of all time of all of our battery tests with Android phones. 3,700 milliamp hour battery, I believe, and that power sipping Snapdragon 670 processor. So check it out if you want an inexpensive Android phone unlocked. Good stuff. And I think that's a wrap. I think we'll just mention a couple things in the chat. Craig Dieter says, yeah, I think I'll be grabbing an X570 board for that PCI Express board. Goodness. Plus, I'll be able to reuse my EK water blocks. All good stuff. Folks are excited about AMD. Folks are excited about Intel. Folks are excited about Qualcomm, man. We're living large here in the tech scene. So make sure you stop by HotHardware.com for all our reviews. We'll drop some links in the description here for the show notes, so you can point to all these articles if you want to check them out in further detail. Stop by HotHardware.com on the web where you can find us. YouTube.com/HotHardware, where you're hopefully looking at us here. Hit thumbs up, subscribe, and the reminder bell so you get notified Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. Twitter.com/HotHardware. Facebook.com/HotHardware. We're everywhere. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for stopping by.
Gonna jump off, guys. I got